The Honourable Member for Scarborough, Agincourt.
Here, here. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm just going to read something from the Hill Times, and it says, this is an article by Michel Drapeau, which is a veteran and a lawyer. He says, the recent rise of suicides of Canada veterans, which have been predictable, has focused national attention to the despair and neglect faced by many of them. It also has drawn attention to the likelihood that a suicide rate among CF members is many times higher than the Canadian statistical norm. This is supported in a Statistics Canada report which was founded that among CF members, 26.6% of the male deaths and 14% of the female deaths were results of suicide. The same report states that the individual with some military career experience are 45% more likely to die as a result of suicide than those in the general population. In the last few weeks leading up to Christmas, Mr. Speaker, and past Christmas, we had 8, and there was another confirmed death yesterday, which was a suicide. That's 9. And that is a number which is very high. There's people that are suffering with post-traumatic stress disorder. There's people that are suffering with all kinds of ailments. There's people that are suffering with broken bones, pulled backs, and everything else. And yet when these people joined the military and they were asked to do things, they did not hesitate. Military is not a 9-to-5 career. Military is not a career where you go in and if something is unsafe, you say, no, I'm not going to do it. Military is quite the opposite. It's 9:01 to 8:59. 9:01 a.m. to 8:59 the next morning a.m. And if you're asked to do something, you have to do it. But let's go back in history. Let's go back in history in the involvement of us as a country. When Canada became a country in Vimy Ridge in 1917, when they charged the bastions and we won, that was World War I. Thousands upon thousands of young men went and joined. Some of them were as young as 15. They had to lie for their age in order to join the military. In 1917, this is Borden's commitment. Just prior to the Battle of Vimy Ridge, Conservative Prime Minister Robert Borden stated that, you can go into this action feeling assured of this, and as the head of the government, I give you this assurance, that you need not fear that the government and the country will fail to show just appreciation of your service to the country and empire in what you're about to do and what you've already done. The government and the country will consider it their first duty to set that a proper appreciation of your effort and of your courage is brought to the notice of people at home. That no man, whether he goes back, whether he remains in Flanders, will have just cause to reproach the government for having broken faith with the man who won and the man who died. Mr. Speaker, Borden's speech was the promise and the moral recognition that Canada and the government of Canada would never forget the sacrifice its veterans and their families make. This promise formed the basis of Canada's legislation to support our veterans. And that was right after World War II. The Pension Act that was enacted did not come about very easily. Yes, there were riots on the street. Yes, there was trouble. Yes, there was fighting. And yes, the veterans felt that they were left behind. However, after World War II, a Pension Act was enacted that provides for the payment of pensions to veterans, veterans who were taken prisoners by the enemy, and to the surviving dependents of all such veterans, and of veterans who were killed or disabled in the course of their military service. Section 2 of the Act states, the provisions of this Act should be liberally construed and interpreted to the end that the recognized obligation of the people and government of Canada to provide compensation to those members of the forces who have been disabled or have died as a result of military service and to their dependents may be fulfilled. Mr. Speaker, that was World War I, the end to end all wars. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. A few years later, 1940, there was another war. But before we get to 1940, and Canadians were again asked to join up, and men and women just drove up and we sacrificed, not only in battle, but we sacrificed back home. In 1930, we had the War Veterans Allowance Act. And the act was enacted, and it said, provides for special income support benefits to veterans in need. Section 101 states, the provisions of this act should be liberally construed and interpreted to the end that the recognized obligation of the people and government of Canada to those who have served their country so well and to their dependents may be fulfilled. Over the years, the Pension Act and the War Veterans Allowance Act has been amended to include members who have served in World War II, Korea War, members of the Merchant Marines, the Canadian Force members and veterans Reestablishment and Compensation Act of Veterans, and we come to 2005, and in 2005 we have the NVC. But before we get to 2005, Mr. Speaker, and the changes that we've seen to, we got the new Veterans Charter, one has to look at history of what our military has done. Between the World War, the Korea War, where we fought under UN flag, and the UN flag was for us to fight North Korea, where the difficulties still go to this very day. We've seen action in Cyprus, we've seen action in the Middle East, we've seen action in the Golan Heights, we've seen actions in Vietnam, this was peacekeeping actions, we've seen NATO actions, we've seen Cold War, we've seen all kinds of action. And the men and the women that served in those theaters, although it was not actual war, they were there as peacekeepers. And this is what put Canada on the map. When you travel abroad and people ask where you're from and you say Canada, the first thing that comes to their mind is that we're a nation of peacekeeping, we're a nation that fights for freedom, and we're a nation that supports other nations in a time of need. And one of those supports that we also provide, Mr. Speaker, is that at the time of disaster, such as we have had in Sri Lanka after the tsunami, in the Muzaffarabad after the earthquake, in Kashmir, in Haiti, after the earthquake, in Turkey after the earthquake, and most recently in the Philippines, we have what is called the DART team. And the Canadian government, successive governments, are very eager to assist the countries, and they offer the DART team. And the DART team goes in, and the men and women of the DART team are there to provide support and are there to help the people of the country get back on their feet. Usually the deployment is 2 to 3 months at the most, and they're there to provide special services and to assist. I had the pleasure and the opportunity to see the DART team at work in Sri Lanka as well as in Pakistan. In Sri Lanka, right after the tsunami, I visited the DART team, and I've seen doctors, men and women, and nurses working on young ones and older men and women that were hurt from the tsunami. I've seen in Pakistan, I met a doctor. He was originally from Pakistan. He spoke the Urdu language. He was a Canadian doctor. He was with the military. And he would wear his backpack full of medical supplies and other medical equipment. He would go up in the mountains to provide service to the people that could not come down in order to go to the hospital. Now, Mr. Speaker, we come to the action of Afghanistan. In 2001-2, Canada got involved in Afghanistan, and in that action, we have a lot of men and women that have come back. It is said that if you got hurt, but you could get into Kandahar within 2 minutes, your life will probably be saved. But we have a lot of men and women that have come back, although we lost about 157, 158 personnel. There's a lot of them that have been wounded and a lot of them that have been maimed. But the difference in this situation is that the men and women that have come back from Afghanistan after 2006 are having to deal with the NVC, the new Veterans Charter. And the NVC, although it has a lot of positives, it has a lot of negatives. It depends who you talk to, and a lot of people are saying that it's time that the NVC, the new Veterans Charter that was supposed to be a living charter, is something that we need to look at, and it's something that we need to update, and it's something that we need to explore. And we're in the process of doing that. But however, the NVC is something that if you get hurt or you get maimed, it gives you a lump sum. And a lot of the people are very, a lot of the personnel that served and veterans are very upset, and there is a case that's taken the government to court. However, let's take a look at the NVC. The liberally construed and interpreted or recognized obligation of the people and the government of Canada. However, Section 43 the benefit of doubt states, in making a decision under this part or under Section 84, the Minister and any person designated under Section 67 shall draw from the circumstances of the case, any evidence present to the Minister or person, every reasonable interference in favor of the applicant under the part or under Section 84, accept any uncontradicted evidence presented to the Minister or person by the applicant and the Minister or person considers to be credible in the circumstances, and resolve in favor of the applicant any doubt of the weight of the evidence as to when the applicant has established a case. All members of the House voted in favor of the NVC, as the main objective of the Charter is to foster the social and vocational rehab establishment of veterans in the Canadian society at large. Unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I was one of those people that voted for it. We were convinced at the day, and some of my colleagues are still here, we were wrong. And the NVC became a barrier for many veterans who have come home injured, either physically or mentally. The death and disability lump sum payments are woefully inadequate when compared to the payment received by the claimants under the WSIB program or by court order settlements for personal injury claimants. One veteran wrote to me and he said that he lost 5% of his brain in an IED attack in Afghanistan, and because there was no mention of the brain or disability dismemberment chart, he will receive nothing to his injury. I've asked for a number of cases which initially were denied by Veterans Affairs, and how many of these cases were appealed to the Veterans Review Appeal Board, VRAB, and how many of the appeal cases have been successfully. I've asked it of the Minister's office. I'm still waiting for it, and that's been over 5 months. To paraphrase several veterans, something like this: I don't mind fighting the enemy, but I shall not have to fight the government that send me to war and to get benefits I've earned. A veteran more specifically wrote, soldiers do their work, come home to fight another battle. Many believe that their government will look after them, but obviously we were wrong. The battles that we have at home hurt more than those that we fought in other parts of the world. Government believes that soldiers are expendable. I can go to court for years. In the meantime, soldiers and their families die. Governments do not lose. It is amazing that we as citizens that are willing to die for the country, knowing full well that some politicians will play their games and look like fools. We've given millions, maybe billions of our tax dollars to other countries and shake hands with the devil, but we will not fight us using more taxpayers to that end. Too bad, so sad, love my country, but this was something, Mr. Speaker, that was written by a veteran. 6 brave veterans have taken this government to court to get the benefits they feel that they and their brothers and sisters in arms are entitled to. They are supported by the Equita Society. When they were to court, government lawyers went to court and they presented their case. But when Mr. Justice Weatherhill of the Supreme Court of British Columbia wrote, it's a better way of doing the same thing as we want to save money, the government lawyer answered, there's absolutely no question that government is entitled to trim allocations if they feel there's a need to save money. The government lawyer went on to say, and if there's a complaint about it, the remedy is at the polls. We went on further to say, yes, the benefits for purpose of this motion are consented to have been more generous under the Pension Act. Yes, government has changed the benefit package, and there appears to be economic disadvantage that flow from that. The government lawyer all but admitted that the changes in compensation offered under the NVC were to save money. Closing, Mr. Speaker, the 9 Veterans Affairs Canada Centres and laying off of the 89 caseworkers is part of this government's workplace adjustment and is balancing the books at the backs of our veterans. However, it is a case of false economy. The district offices that are set for closures are Corner Brook. Files from there will most likely go to St. John, an 8-hour drive between Corner Brook and St. John's. Sydney, the files will more likely go to Halifax, 5 to 6 hour drive between Sydney and Halifax. Charlottetown, the files will likely go to Campbellton or Halifax, 5 to 7 hours drive for both. Thunder Bay, the files will likely go to Winnipeg, 9 to 10 hours drive. Windsor, the files will likely go to London, 2.5 hours. Saskatoon, the files will likely go to Regina, 3-hour drive. Brandon, the files will probably go to Silo, 30 to 45 minutes drive, or as we learned when the vets from Brandon were here, they were thinking that the files would probably go to Winnipeg, which is an hour and a half to 2 hours drive. Prince George, the files are dealt with by Vancouver or Penticton, 10 hours drive, 8-hour drive to Penticton. Now, the government members will say, no, there's a government Service Canada office there. Well, in that case, Mr. Speaker, I would challenge any of them to phone up the Manouche, Dennis Manouche, that took the government to court, and he won, and he tells me that he has to drive to Penticton. Kelowna, the files will likely go to Penticton, which is an hour away. Mr. Speaker, let's examine what service managers do versus Canada service workers. Veterans Affairs workers believe special line ongoing training because Veterans Affairs services and programs like the needs of the veterans are vast and complex and always evolving. Service Canada workers have received limited training about Veterans Affairs services and programs, can only answer general questions in addition to supplying and receiving forms. And they would tell the veterans, why don't you go over there and either dial the number for VAC Centre, which is 1-866-522-2122, or press the computer. Now, I did that, and I got a capture here, and it says Service Canada People Servicing People, contact information, and it gives that number, and that is Veterans Affairs. Now, when we look, Mr. Speaker, at the areas that they're trying to close, and I'm going to look at 3 offices. Charlottetown, that has 2,135 people, veterans that it looks after. Sydney has 1,485, and Thunder Bay has 1,048. A lot of vets go to VAC centres that are suffering from PST. PST, Mr. Speaker, is it's a double, and I have a letter from Gordon Hortridge that says, my dance with the devil. I have come close to suicide a few times, but never this close. The thought of my life and of my wife and kids have always aced my attempting suicide, but not this time. I ignited a firestorm last Saturday, and it ended up with me sitting in front of my computer with a 45 in my hands. The mental pain was building all day Sunday. Anything was out of control. I couldn't shake the pain. Mr. Speaker, this veteran tried to call the number for the VAC Centre. It was Saturday. It was closed. And it said, if you're calling and this is an emergency, dial 911 or go to the closest hospital. And there was a challenge that was put out, and the vets themselves came about, and they put an emergency line. And they have a number, and it's 855-373-8387, and it's manned 24/7. And if you call that number, and if you're a vet in distress, there's be another vet that will answer your call. He's been there. He's done that. He knows what PST is all about. He knows what the trigger points are, and he'll help you. Gord was one of those people that called that number, and he was helped. Caseworkers, Mr. Speaker, wanting to drive 10 hours, that is totally unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, I know that you're giving me the signal that I have only 2 minutes left and I can go on for hours. But I will end up with this. One veteran told me that he paid 4 visits to 2 Service Canada centres and were told by the Service Canada staff that they couldn't help him. Should a veteran live in a community which does not have a Service Canada location, calling the 1-800 number is even more frustrating. One veteran told me that pressing 1 or 2, and he got so frustrated he put the line down. It's extremely frustrating for someone who suffers from post-traumatic stress disorder, and he usually ends up just by hanging on. This is not the way to help our veterans. Again, the number for the Veterans Affairs phone number, and Mr. Speaker, I'm just seeking permission if I can dial it for us to hear what they say. I'm just seeking permission of all the members. I'll dial it right now on my cell to see what it says. It's after 4:30. Do I have your permission, Mr. Speaker?
Does the honourable member for Scarborough Agincourt have the unanimous consent of the House to use a device in the chamber?
Mr. Speaker.
I'm not. Yes or no? There's no consent. The honourable member.
saying no because they know as soon as we dial that number and that number goes live and it's heard across the country, they will hear after 4:30, thank you for dialing. And if this is an emergency, dial 911 or close, go to your hospitals. Mr. Speaker, in the National Post, there was a thing that says veterans learning that Caledonia residents already know the minister is a bully. And it closes, in the first 6 months on the job, he zipped off to Paris to give a speech at an international meeting, was in Korea for the 60th anniversary of the armistice. Those veterans who have blown off by Mr. Fantino paid it in their taxes and with their service.
Order. 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 We are out of time.